I'm Kirk Laughlin with TelecomTV here in Coppell, Texas at the opening of the Coriant facility here, and sitting down today with the Chief Executive Officer at Coriant, Pat DiPietro. Pat, your experience at Marlin has included focus on venture capital, business transformation, and sourcing. How do you really leverage all of those experiences in your new role as Chief Executive of Coriant?
So Kirk, actually, it's not so much the experience I've had with Marlin. It's my experience even before I joined being a VC. I was actually in telecom for 23 years and rose through the ranks at Nortel, Bell Northern Research, and several other companies, actually building the kind of products that we are doing today in Coriant. Then I became a VC for a decade before joining Marlin, and I built a whole pile of young technology companies, which some of them we took public, some were sold to larger OEMs. Many of them were in the telecom space and served the same kind of customers that we're serving today in Coriant. So I've had both the big company experience and the small company experience and the financial experience. So I think it rounds out my knowledge base to be able to help Coriant grow.
Mm-hmm. So what excites you most about Coriant today?
So as you know, basically we took the optical networking assets of Nokia Siemens network and spun them out. We created Coriant out of that. That was a Marlin initiative to start a platform company in this optical networking space. We were able to add to that the Sycamore assets, and then we had the opportunity to buy Tellabs. By putting the three together, we now have essentially an end-to-end portfolio in transport networking. It's as good as any of the majors, and if you look at us from the point of view of our sales relative to the top companies, we're now number 4 position worldwide. So we feel very good about where we can take the company because we have also essentially the spirit of a billion-dollar startup.
Let's be honest, there's a mixed record for a lot of private equity organizations coming into the telecommunications technology industry. How do you think Marlin's approach will be different as it leads the growth of Coriant?
One of the reasons I joined Marlin is it's really atypical of a private equity company. The principals who started Marlin had a lot of private equity experience, wanted to start their own firm. They came out of a large firm called Gores. They learned their trade at this firm called Gores. One of the sort of disciplines around Marlin is that they are long-term investors. They actually believe in technology. In fact, they were on our 4th fund, and every one of them has been a technology fund. If you're in the technology business, you know that it's not a turnaround in a week. If you look at Marlin's average hold period, it's over 5 years. So Marlin has also an ethos of actually partnering with people that come from the operating space. So they would pick people like myself. I spent 20-odd years in telecom before even meeting up with Marlin. And they're looking for people who know what it takes to win in a particular industry. So when we make an investment, when Marlin made an investment, they knew what they were getting into. And so I'm very thankful of the approach. If you look at our exit criteria, it's simply about building the company to the best it can be. And then the company's sizable enough that it could be taken public.
When you look at Coriant, your organization has assets throughout the world, particularly in Europe, North America, and Asia. Do you have a certain priority around how you will address those markets and build demand?
If you look at the 3 geographies that you mentioned, North America, Europe, Middle East, and Asia, if you look at them, we're probably 30-30-30, or a third split in terms of revenue. We also have, in terms of employees, a good geographic split. So we have this ability to develop basically around the clock for around the world if we want to do a product very, very quickly, and we're doing stuff like that. If you look at Europe, they're just starting the LTE build now, really, with Vodafone having sold their stake in Verizon. They got their $100 billion plus. Now they were mainly 3G in all their properties, and now they're going to 4G, which is LTE. That's just slightly behind what's happening in North America, and so we see that starting to build. And then you look at Asia, and as you know, what's happening in China today is that they have finally signed off on their 4G deployments. And so that's going to come next.
Do you have a sales office in Africa?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely we do. In several places. But our biggest installation is in South Africa, where we have a major business with both of the major operators, Vodacom and Telecom South Africa. 10 million cell phones in 06, 590 million cell phones this past year. Africa is growing like a weed in relative to the rest of the world. And the cell phones, okay, they're 3G, they're moving an amount of data. They're continuing to really build out their networks because of the number of phones.
Where does Latin America fit in?
Latin America is also a very important geography for us. We do about 11% of our revenue, and I lumped it into North America myself.
Okay, the Americas. Yeah.
The Americas. We treat the Americas, because they're basically all the same time zone,
Exactly.
We try to treat them the same. We have a lot of South American operators who are using our mobile backhaul solutions and our data solutions. We have a good presence, a very large presence in Brazil. You asked, what do we see in terms of innovation in Latin America? We're opening up collaboration with some Brazilian companies now to look at potentially doing R&D in Brazil. There's good people all over the world, basically, and we want to tap into all of them.
You've mentioned several times the importance of being quick and agile. How would you say your approach differs from your predecessors who ran some of the organizations you've acquired?
Yeah, I think we're doing a lot of things differently. And having come, let me give you an example. Having come from Nortel myself, I was responsible for some very, very large projects. I mean, if you look at AT&T today, their entire 3G wireless infrastructure was designed by my group. So very large, heavy iron. One of the things I learned, I was always sort of miffed at Nortel, is that we couldn't move faster. And we thought we were relatively fast. So if you recall, around the turn of the century, there was the big bust in telecom. And during that time, I had transitioned and became a VC. So I was running a relatively sizable VC fund in Canada, in Ottawa specifically. And I started companies based around people that used to work for me. So one of these companies specifically, I'll call out here because it was a really good success story, was Bel Air Networks. Mm-hmm. And Bel Air, we sold a few years ago when I was a VC, we sold it to Ericsson, a very good outcome for everyone. The same group of people that were in Bel Air were also in Nortel. In Nortel, what we did in 36 months, we were able to do in 36 weeks at Bel Air with the same people.
What's the difference?
So here's the difference. Get out of people's way. Management has to get out of people's way. Let people make decisions lower in the organization, number one. Another really important aspect is don't try to do everything on the first go of your product. One of the things we got really bound up in our shorts with in Nortel, and by the way, Telabs and NSN, no different, the larger organizations start to build what are called product specifications. And the product specifications get thicker and thicker and thicker as the people who engage the customer take customer feedback. And they tend to start to add these features up and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. By the time they add a grid of all those features, the product's undoable in the time that you're expecting. So another thing you have to do is know what not to do. So one of the things we're doing at Coriant is creating a different level of customer intimacy. Not one where we take orders about what they say they want, but one where we actually think very deeply about what they need. There's a big difference. And it looks subtle on the surface, but it's very, very poignant underneath.
It sounds like there's a consulting ingredient in your mission.
That's exactly right. I have an example I use, which is the one of a racing car driver and his pit crew, or her pit crew. I mean, there's some good female racing car drivers. So the driver runs around the track in a new vehicle and jumps out and says, Kirk, you know what? I know you designed this car, but I don't have enough horsepower. Coming out of the corners, I think you just got to give me a little more horsepower. So Kirk goes to his pit crew and says, you know, Pat's a driver. He doesn't design cars, but he's really a great driver. What is really going on with the car? Well, the reason it's not coming out of the corners is because it's not sprung well enough in the rear. It has nothing to do with not having enough power. So let's not let's listen for the problem and not for his solution. And so we're going to give him what he needs, not what he wants, because it's born out of driving the car and not designing the car. So I have a very deep history with large operators, having come from my background at Bell Northern Research, and I know there's a big difference between what solves the problem and what the customer articulates as the solution. And in the consultative process, you come around to what is the minimum feature set required to really meet the solution need. And if you do that, you cut out a lot of the work. And I've talked to several customers since taking over the role, and interestingly enough, they actually agree with me. They go, we only use 20% of the features that you actually design into the product. So if we agree up front not to do those features, we can do a higher quality product in a shorter period of time. That's what startups do.